Ralph. From the book, Singers. Written by Peter Maguire. Read by Lucy Wharton. I'm mad about the boy. And I know it's stupid to be mad about the boy. I'm so ashamed of it, but must admit the sleepless nights I've had. About the boy. Ralph stood naked in front of the long mirror fixed to tiled wall over the wash basin. This he did every morning. Examined his face. No obvious lines of age. Sideways reflection revealed the reasonably flat plexus, not quite so firm as in his 20s, but for a man nearing 36, acceptable. Ralph recognized Narcissus in action. This daily close examination of personal desirability, mixing pride with anxiety, is perhaps of greater concern to men who prefer men. Men who prefer women, pot-bellied individuals, unthinkingly assume their masculine allure remains intact. Not so with men who love men. Considering the late nights at the Chez and early mornings getting to bed, 2 to 3 after midnight most days, the house requirement to drink what the clients generously offered. Smoky atmospheres unavoidable hazard for singers. Ralph knew his constitution was robust. Could absorb the stress. A man working in a smelting shop might think his work was hot and tough. Compared with a singer and master of ceremonies in a town center nightclub, work involved ladling molten metal could be rated less hazardous. The decor and fitments in the bathroom displayed the hand and eye of his partner. Ralph and Vivian had lived as a couple for just over 15 years. Vivian had a penchant for the dramatic. Gold taps on bath and wash basin. A bidet. Thick off-white shag pile covered the floor. Ruched curtains. Discreet pink shaded central light fitting. Only the bulbs that illuminated the mirror were all revealing, and even they were controlled by a dimmer switch. Furnishings in the spacious rooms within their apartment were immaculately fussy, demanding a level of constant attention that would horrify the average housewife. For Vivian, this nurture had been a particular delight. Unfortunately, health concerns, mental and physical, gradually began transforming former delight into the onerous. Vivian would be 65 on his next birthday. There were some private means, and additionally Ralph earned good money working at the Chez, and this allowed them to hire what Vivian preferred to describe as being a femme de ménage. The problem was these title-enhanced toilers never extended their employ for more than a few months. Vivian was not an unkind man, paid well, but his persistent fussiness was extremely wearing and trustworthy, and competent house cleaners were as difficult to find as albino foxes. So they, with kindly reluctance, moved on to care for more amenable employers and unsupervised care of interiors. Ralph did share to some degree Vivian's desire to live in an environment dust-free, ordered, aesthetic. Together they had enjoyed more than 15 years of contented living. What now agitated Ralph was the gradual but obvious fragmentation of what was once a sharp and witty mind. Advice and examination was sought from their sympathetic and non-judgmental doctor. Following this, he privately explained to Ralph that his partner was starting to show the early symptoms of dementia. No, nothing could be done, no cure, not even much in the way of medication. They both, without censure, had occasional casual relationships. Open relationships in their world not uncommon. It was necessary to be discreet and careful. The law concerning their orientation, both harsh and unfair, in essence had hardly changed since the days of Wilde. Entrapment a regular strategy, in a city where the chief constable considered it his duty, not only to be concerned with enforcing the law as written, but a moral responsibility to a greater wigless judge. Every city has pubs and clubs where safe and confident relaxation could be found. Their world was in essence no different than others who share a specific passion, hobbies for instance, rather than more interpersonal relations. Niche meeting places where the like-minded could gather. Over the past 2 or 3 years this pleasurable ricocheting had diminished, particularly so for Vivian, who became more and more reluctant to wander far from the security of his Belle Epoque apartment, rather than to haunt more Weimar surroundings. Tina North sat with Ralph at a quiet table in the Chez after the show had ended and the clients had left. The bar staff were tidying and cleaning bar tops and rinsing dirty glasses. Ralph refreshed Tina's gin with another splash of tonic. Ralph was the consummate professional. His leg might have been about to fall off, but the audience be totally unaware that anything was amiss. Tina knew better. It requires a practiced ear to detect the slight variation in tone that indicates during a song that something non-vocal was troubling the singer. "Is this about Vivian?" was unspoken. Ralph's personal and domestic arrangements were of no mystery to the staff of the Chez Joey. In the past, though not recently, Vivian would settle on an unobtrusive bar stool, usually on a Saturday night, watch the show and then leave with Ralph to go home, or sometimes to take in a late-night Indian restaurant, or perhaps another club. Everyone liked Vivian. He was polite and amusing and radiated that rare quality of asking about their doings, instead giving detailed expositions of his own preoccupations. Recently Vivian had started to do something that had never happened in the past, telephoning several times during the course of an evening and asking, and sometimes even demanding, to talk to Ralph. Ralph first met Vivian 1 month after his 21st birthday. Vivian ran a small but successful commercial art studio. Known around the club scene, his studio was responsible for the design and production of numerous posters, trade visiting card, and other print and paper necessaries. Ralph, who was beginning to gain an increasing level of attention as a stylish performer, had called in at Vivian's office to arrange the design and printing of business cards whose layout and weight would reinforce the receiver's affirmation of his rising status, both as a singer and MC. Within a month Ralph had moved in to share Vivian's comfortable and individualistic apartment and his bed. Theirs was a comfortable arrangement. Vivian understood the demands of Ralph's work as a singer, with the odd hours going and odd hours coming home again. Ralph admired Vivian's creativity and business acumen. They had many friends, men and some women, who fully understood the pleasures and dangers of their chosen lifestyle. Neurosis was not a factor in their personal lives, both understanding and comfortably accepting their relationship preferences. There was nothing of the outrageous in their appearance or behavior. Seen walking down the street together, even ultra-observant passers-by would register nothing other than two outwardly unremarkable men on their way to somewhere. Uncharacteristic incidents were the first indication that the idyll was starting to fracture. Vivian had never been aggressive even during their infrequent arguments. Ralph had made a cup of tea and Vivian looked at the proportion of tea to milk, was displeased, and only just restrained himself from hurling the saucer and cup across the room. An instant of tension melded into a frown of sadness and stress. He had looked up at Ralph and said, "Forgive me," an assurance that there was nothing to forgive, making him seem to be even more confused. That night at the Chez, Tina sensed real sadness in Ralph's singing. There was nothing superficial in his articulation of the words. Yesterdays, yesterdays, days I knew as happy sweet, sequestered days, olden days, golden days, days of mad romance and love. Then gay youth was mine, and truth was mine, joyous free and flaming life, forsooth was mine. Sad am I, glad am I, for today I'm dreaming of yesterdays. Then gay youth was mine, the truth was mine. Sad am I, glad am I, for today I'm dreaming of yesterdays. The morning was a fine one. The evening before had been difficult. Vivian had telephoned the Chez Joey 6 times, and when Ralph was eventually able to answer his 7th call, having just ended his first set of the evening, the distress in Vivian's voice was palpable. "Where are you?" "You know where I am. At work." "The Chez Joey." "When will you be coming home?" "The usual time. Around 2. "Oh. Where are you?" "At the Chez Joey." "Why don't you have a large scotch and go to bed?" "I will see you later or in the morning." "Who are you with?" "No one." "Where are you?" "Look. I have to ring off. Shelia North spot coming up, and I need to be on the stage do the announcing. You know she has a particular routine with the high stool and the curtains." Vivian seemed, just for a fraction of time, to understand. Then, "Where are you?" The line went dead as Ralph replaced the telephone receiver. Vivian woke up around 9:30, later than usual. Usually he was an early riser. Ralph made him a cup of coffee and some toast. The confusion of the previous evening appeared to have evaporated. Ralph suggested they go into town and do some shopping. Nothing specific. Clothes, jewelry, fabrics. Not even to buy, just to look and enjoy, buying only if there was something irresistible. This was the kind of itinerary Vivian loved. This bright morning there was no indication of distress or anxiety. Shopping and then lunch. Perfect. Relaxed and jokingly happy. Just like old times. Vivian animated, critical, and admiring of the various types of merchandise they eyed over. Going into a particularly large department store, with floor upon floor of fashionable goods of every kind, they strolled amusedly about. Hold on a moment, Vivian, I will only be a minute. I need to go to the gents. Vivian smiled back at him. I'll wait here and I will have a look at these silk ties. Might even buy one for you, providing you are a good boy. Returning less than 5 minutes later, Vivian had gone. Must have wandered off to look in another section of the department, inwardly sensing Vivian had done no such thing. An increasingly fraught search of the entire store floor by floor. Nothing. Inquiry at the information desk situated on the ground floor. Nothing. The young woman explained that the public address system was usually reserved to reunite lost children with their mothers, but in this instance she would make an exception. Please come to the information desk. Thank you. Nothing. Ralph left the department store and walked rapidly around the city streets and squares, scanning the crowds. Nothing. Brief visits to some of their favorite bars and restaurants. Nothing. The sergeant behind the desk at the police station looked quizzical and peered at Ralph with his professionally honed tendency towards suspicion. Ralph and Vivian had lived together for 15 years, but the cohabitation had no status in law. Their loving and committed relationship in eyes of the law a vicious and immoral one. You say your friend has disappeared? Yes. This afternoon. We were having a look around Curtis and Davenport. The department store in Upper Mill Street. I left him on his own for a moment. He knew it would be very unwise to say he had gone to the gents, even though a perfectly innocent necessity. The sergeant paused for a moment. What is your relationship to this person? A member of your family? No. A good friend. Known each other for years. Well, I must say that it's only a few hours ago. A grown independent man. He can go where he wants without having to ask anybody. Right. Ralph knew that tone of worming innuendo. A convincing explanation was needed. Truth is, he has bouts of memory loss. The doctor has seen him and warned it's a progressive condition with no available cure. The sergeant dimly considering this to be reasonable. He has no family. A bachelor. I see. Mused the sergeant, visualizing his congenitally disagreeable wife. Not a bad way to lead your life. Fancy-free. Ralph, reading the sergeant's thoughts, and his expression, added, until you find yourself in a situation such as this one. The sergeant considered for a moment. Desk full of paperwork to wade through. No point in prolonging the interview. Are you on the telephone? Leave me your number. If we get a report in, I will call you. Ralph thanked him and left the police station, relieved to be out and away from this arena of explanations and potential menace. He took a taxi back to the flat and poured himself a large neat scotch. Sat down feeling drained and listless. Nothing to be done but wait. The scotch and stress combined to lure him into a troubled doze. Around 2 in the afternoon the telephone rang. Semi-consciousness jolted into alert. Good afternoon, sir. Cannon Street Police Station here. There might be some news about your missing friend. A report has just arrived about a confused man having been left in the care of St. Agnes's Hospital. You know how to get there. Ralph assured him. I will call a taxi and get up there to check if it's my friend. Many thanks for your call and concern. St. Agnes's Hospital had been built in the middle of the 19th century. Architects during this period were also commissioned to design workhouses. Workhouses have now been demolished. Their imprint, however, remains to be seen in the structure of hospital facades. Unwelcoming, neglected brickwork. Institutions that cared, in general, for the ailing lower echelons. Ralph asked the taxi driver to wait, however long, and getting out, walked through the echoing main entrance. Inside the doors was a porter's lodge. A bleak room in actuality. Sitting on a bench inside, hunched and wretched, Vivian. Looking up at Ralph, he did not greet or acknowledge him. The porter sitting at a desk behind a sliding window explained, indicating Vivian, that the duty doctor had prescribed and administered a mild sedative. Vivian had gone out of the department store and hailed a taxi. The taxi driver informed the porter and the duty doctor that he seemed excited and said he was on his way to meet his mother, giving an address and asking the driver to take him there. The taxi driver knew this location to be an area where extensive clearance had taken place in recent years, much of the ground still barren, waiting redevelopment, and for the builders to move in and start work. They had driven around for almost half an hour, the taxi driver eventually asking at one of the very few small shops that still existed about the address he was trying to find, only to be told it had been razed more than 5 years ago, leaving only weeds as an epitaph to the street ever having been there. The taxi driver began to realize his passenger, colloquially, had lost his marbles. Many taxi drivers infuriated at losing time and a fare would have been inclined to dump Vivian out of the taxi and drive off without giving it a moment's consideration or regret. Vivian was fortunate to have been picked up by a more compassionate individual, who immediately took him to the nearest hospital, and having escorted him inside explained the circumstances to the porter. "I'm a family friend," explained Ralph. "We were shopping when he wandered off. Can I take him home?" There was no formalities. No papers to sign. He refrained from mentioning that Vivian's mother had died 20 years ago. The taxi was awaiting in the roadway outside of the hospital. Ralph helped an uncomprehending Vivian into the back of the cab and they were driven home. Paying the fare, the taxi driver said, "Hope you mate is feeling better?" Thinking, well, at least he had not been sick on the floor, a regular hazard of a taxi driver's calling, particularly on a late Saturday night. Ralph smiled his thank you and gave the driver a generous tip, over and above the fare on the meter. Once inside, Ralph made a pot of tea, lapsang souchong, and poured Vivian a cup of this much appreciated infusion. The warm and smoky brew appeared to boost him into a more articulate and conscious state. Vivian appeared to have no recollection of the events at the department store, the taxi, the hospital, and there did not seem to be any sensible reason to question or enlighten him. Vivian had mentally broken the surface, and gulping the air of rationality, was behaving as he once was. In the evening about to leave for the Chez, Ralph had to suppress rising anxiety about having to leave his partner alone in the flat. Vivian showed no signs of anxiety or stress, cheerful and calm, just like all those evenings in the past when it was time for Ralph to leave for work. "I'm off now. Work calls. No rest for the wicked. Should be home around 2. Why don't you go to bed with a large gin and a good book?" Vivian smiled. "Don't worry about me. I will be fine. Why shouldn't I be?" Afterwards, Ralph recalled the intense embrace and kiss Vivian had given him before he opened the door and left. Affection wears a changing garb when couples have been together for many years, not diminished, expressed differently. This moment of intimacy invoked a memory their earlier years together. They exchanged a parting gaze and the door closed. The evening at the Chez went well. Always a good appreciative crowd on Saturday evenings. Ralph was aware that fundamentally, nothing had altered regarding Vivian's prognosis, but had a notion that, maybe, the ramifications were now better understood, this understanding making for better means of dealing with the inevitable. There was a perceptible stillness in the apartment when Ralph opened the door and went in. The lights were out, with the exception of a small table lamp in the sitting room which was always left on until he came home. Going into the darkened bedroom, Vivian could never sleep if there was even a trace of light. He undressed quickly and slipped under the covers. He reached across to squeeze Vivian's hand. It was warm but felt limp and lifeless. Turning on his bedside light, he looked at the face on the pillow. Vivian never slept on his back. Always on his right side. His color looked normal, and yet, something was very wrong. Fearfully, he leaned across and placed a forefinger just to the side of his ear. He pressed again. Then again. No pulse. For an instant Ralph became rigid. If Vivian was dead. And of that there seemed to be little doubt.
Tears must be postponed.
Essential reputation-saving matters needed to be done and arranged. He got out of bed and walked around to the other side and switched on Vivian's bedside lamp, illuminated by the pink shade, a bottle for sleeping pills, empty. 2 envelopes, one was addressed to himself, marked personal on its face with Vivian's enviable penmanship. The script did not show the customary firmness of line, there was a hesitancy in the strokes. On the front of the other letter, "To whom it may concern." He opened the personal envelope and read, "My darling boy. All will be over when you read this. What happened today is never going to occur again. My own dignity. Your sanity. Sooner or later we both know what the end will be. I have no intention of spending my final years uncomprehending, in an uncomprehending world. You are still a young man and need space to move on. For me it's over. Sharing my days with you has been the happiest period of my life, your love and caring sustaining me, and for all of those years. Thank you. Try not to be too sad. I know this to be the best course of action for both of us. Your ever-loving Vivian. P.S. I have been hoarding my sleeping pills for months against this inevitable day. What a naughty boy I am. XXX. Ralph took a dressing gown from a chair at the foot of the bed and put it on. He pushed the opened and read letter into the right pocket. Took the second unsealed letter from the bedside table. To whom it may concern. Increasing distress caused by a medical condition for which there is no cure available. I decided to end my life with fortitude and dignity. This is wholly my own decision. My affairs are all in good order. I apologize in advance of the work and inconvenience I may have caused. Vivian Davidson. Half-joking, half-serious, Ralph and Vivian had in the past discussed a possible scenario such as the one Ralph was now in, formulating the course of action he must follow if one or the other had become seriously and suddenly ill. Between a man and wife, an obvious tragedy. When the couple were 2 men, a tragedy could rapidly become sinister escalation when questions would be asked. They had a number of years ago made wills and testaments in favor of the other. Ralph put the "To whom it may concern" letter back into the envelope and carefully laid it back onto the bedside table. He took care not to touch anything, particularly the sleeping pills bottle. What followed was reasonably easy. They kept all of their clothes in a small dressing room that had been fitted with built-in cupboards. Within their bedroom, very few personal belongings. Emptying the small drawer in his own bedside table, and picking up the book he had been reading, he quickly took them into the spare bedroom. Made the room look convincingly occupied. Went back to their shared bedroom and checked again to make sure it looked as if were Vivian's personal and private domain. He did not switch off the bedside light. Reverently, he bent over Vivian's face, kissed him on his brow, switched off the light on his own bedside table, and then went to telephone the police. The police constable who rang the door, accompanied by a police surgeon, was a very different example of an upholder of the law than the sergeant at the desk at the police station. A young man with a fresh complexion, only asking what questions were necessary, with nothing to indicate that he was on a digging expedition. The doctor examined Vivian, the sleeping pill bottle. Both the doctor and police constable read the "To whom it may concern" letter. Ralph had no intention of showing them the letter addressed to himself. "Can I make a cup of tea?" suggested Ralph. The police constable and the doctor assented. They all sat down in the sitting room. Looked at the decor with interest but made no comment. Ralph judged them to be intelligent and perceptive. They knew exactly what kind of menage they were sitting in. Nothing was said. The routine was explained. "Took his own life when the balance of the mind was disturbed," said the doctor. "There will have to be an inquest. It will be an open and shut proceedings. There are no doubts or questions that need to be examined concerning the circumstances." He sought the approval of the constable. This was proffered. An ambulance came half an hour later. Laid Vivian on a stretcher. Covered him with a blanket and carried him out of the apartment. The policeman and the doctor left, but not before shaking Ralph's hand and expressing their condolences. The door closed and Ralph was alone. There seemed little point in staying away from work. He quietly and privately explained to the boss, to Tina and Shelia, the bar staff, what had happened. Some of the world would also know soon enough when a police report reached the news desk at the local newspaper. The report of the inquest. Then all would be soon forgotten, except perhaps by a few friends and acquaintances. Ralph Ever the Trooper directed the evening at the Chez Joey with his customary aplomb. Tina North, sitting in the dressing room and hearing the first few bars, came to the door and listened to Ralph singing. The very thought of you makes my heart sing, like an April breeze on the wings of spring. And you appear in all your splendor, my one and only love. The shadows fall and spread their mystic charms. In the hush of night while you're in my arms, I feel your lips, so warm and tender, my one and only love.
If you enjoyed Ralph by Peter Maguire, please click on the like and subscribe buttons.